On episode 118 of the Vincast, I chat with Phil Hude, owner-operator of one of Melbourne's most iconic wine stores, Armadale Cellars. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Vincast. My name is James Guestbrook, otherwise known as the Intrepid Wino, and I'm very excited to finally be able to release a new episode of the wine podcast that unfortunately I haven't been able to focus on as much as I would have liked this year. As I mentioned on previous couple of episodes, I've been otherwise occupied with winemaking, a new job, and most importantly, my now 3-month-old son, Oliver, who makes life so much more enjoyable, but does make it hard to find the time to record episodes of the podcast. So I'm excited to have a new one, and could not be more excited about my guest for this episode, someone who is very well known in the wine trade here in Melbourne and is one of the most iconic wine retailers. His name is Phil Hude, and he this year is celebrating 20 years as the owner-operator of Armadale Cellars. And I sat down with him recently in the gorgeous cellars on High Street, and we had a chat about his background and what makes Armadale Cellars and his contribution to wine retailing so important. So I hope you do enjoy the episode. Stick around till the end, and you can find out how to get in touch with Phil and myself. But until then, I'll see you on the other side. Phil, thank you for making some time in your busy schedule. Obviously, a big year and lots of exciting events this year, but it's really fantastic to be able to sit down with you here in the cellars of Armadale Cellars to have a chat about you and this wonderful store.
Thanks, James. Yeah, had a challenging morning, as we sometimes do in the joys of wine retail. But Russell, I'm going well. Richard Branson tweeted not that long ago that about 3% of people get up in the morning and absolutely love what they do. And today's been a challenging morning, but mainly every morning I love what I do, and I love coming to work. And I wouldn't say I live for work by any means. I love my family, so. But you know, I have been accused of being a little bit of a workaholic, and nothing succeeds like hard work. But,
absolutely, and I think the fact that you're celebrating 20 years here at Armadale Cellars, that is a testament to that work ethic.
It's a bit of a stint, and I must admit, when I walked in here 20 years ago, if someone had said you're going to be here in 20 years and have the all the interesting people in wine, and have great wine dinners and enjoy yourself completely silly most nights of the week, I would have laughed. But it has been a great journey, and I'm renowned for living life to the full. But it is great fun.
So I'm going to take you back quite a while, I would think. Can you remember, because I start every episode pretty much the same way, Can you remember the first interaction you had with wine that made you think about it in a different way and possibly set you on the path towards a career in wine?
Yeah, certainly. It's I was brought up, so to speak, in work terms in hotels/pubs. So I did hotel catering management out of All Boys Catholic College, who obviously sent me to the drink. And pretty simply, I did 2 years at what was FIT, now Vic Uni, doing hotel catering management, and then managed pubs because I decided that course was extremely accounting based, and I kept failing accounting, and I think the invigilator told me to go forth after failing basic accounting 4 times. And so I went and worked in pubs the hard way, so to speak, and just started in the as a glassy and what have you, and then worked my way up and did every job possible and ended up in management. And it was then that being a beer and Bundy boy, which is a disgraceful thing to admit, and it wasn't because I liked beer. In fact, I've never been a great beer lover, although I think in my youth it was a pretty homogenous brand of beer in this country. Now it's completely different, of course. But I then had a catering manageress put me under her wing and said, listen, rather than drinking that awful black shoe polish stuff and beer. How about I let you try, why don't we try a wine with our meal tonight? This is at the pub, because being a pub manager, we got given our meals, of course. And that sort of started the flick, or the flick of the flame. And then I think what got the burning bush going was my brother got a job at Campbell's Winery as an accountant, which is pretty funny considering I failed accounting and he's an accountant, and my father's a 50-year veteran accountant.
Clearly he got all the accounting genes.
Exactly. I was holding the door open, obviously. And pretty simply, he went and worked at Campbell's. So I went up to the Rutherglen Walkabout, and which is a bit of an oxymoron because you're not walking about by the end of it. And
I think the walkabout's this weekend, actually.
It might be. That's right. Yes, it is normally around my birthday time. So pretty simply, yes, that's right, the long weekend. But pretty simply, I think I cut my teeth on very sweet, good, high-end fortified.
Sure.
So like a lot of kids, I was privileged that I remember, drinking some stuff out of Colin Campbell's very small 100-year-old barrel, and which was just like nectar and treacle almost. And so I think that's started it. And then, as you do, you have a few people who sort of inspire you. And then I just found every sort of minute outside pubs that I pretty simply was going to wineries and trying wines and asking all the questions you do. And I was just besotted.
Yeah.
And I had the wine bug, as I call it.
So what sort of wineries would you be visiting? What regions and what was there much wine tourism at that time?
Yeah, 25 years ago it was sort of embryonic to say the least, and there was only, from memory, 600 wineries in Australia and only a couple of hundred in Victoria. And so, I remember when Rick Kinsbrunner started at G. Conda, and he was out of engineering, or, worked at Brown Brothers, and there was all these, as you know, that's a frightfully incestuous industry, so everyone knows everyone to some degree, or there's, two parts before
It's certainly not 6 degrees. It's a lot less
it's
degrees.
2 degrees.
Separation,
It is.
yeah.
I reckon it's 2 degrees of separation, and 6 parts that of a drink that you've shared with someone else. But long story short, people like David Anderson at Wild Duck, when they started, just all sorts of people that now have become my bread and butter, so to speak, and who I support, and I am pretty loyal. That's probably one of my great attributes, is that I'm very loyal to people, especially if I know that they've got quality and good product. Mm-hmm. So yeah, those sort of people, and then obviously travelled over to Coonawarra, went up to the Hunter, went to all sorts of regions. And I love travelling and visiting wine regions. I think that I could do that for the rest of my life happily, and do. Went to Italy last year, and it's an amazing thing to be able to do that as part of your job and see the world and see wine growing areas. So yeah, no, it's always been a great passion, and I think that's part of it. I think tourism was always an interesting part. I actually chose tourism as my second course, funnily enough, to hotel catering management in my early days. And then, of course, I went on and did Roseworthy as a mature age student once I got the bug completely, and met Patrick Island, and Patrick Island got me basically a bit of a free walk into Roseworthy as a mature age, and because he could see that I was completely and utterly gone on it. And
besotted.
I was besotted, and then I made my transition from pubs into wine retail.
Right. Okay. So, what was the extent of wine in pubs at that time? Was there much, or was it?
It was pretty bag in the box. Yeah, silver pillow, and carafe it off, and pretend that it's actually something special. But in some ways, I mean, again, as a child, I remember my father, driving his GT Ho up to Mitchelton, to the great white symbol in the sky, and and how important that was. How Mitchelton to Bilk in those days was like a starting ground for a lot of people to try wine, let alone, and there were so many interesting brands, and but they were just, some of it was just shadow average, and I'm not sure there was any great wine culture of any distinction. There was just a few sort of groups of people who were interested in the odd winemaker and whatever, who obviously was besotted into the industry, but. In the time I've been in the industry, it's obviously become huge and a great part of our life. And it's just now the fact our courses are so sought after and fill very quickly is testament to the fact that people want to learn about this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I would think that as far as maybe pubs out in the wine regions, they probably would be stocked with a bit of wine. Settlers, what is it? The Settlers Tavern over in Margaret River is one of the ones that I've visited that's pretty well known for their, reasonably well stocked cellar.
Well, you look at the Dunkeld, and
of course,
idiosyncratic.
Royal Mail's a bit different.
The Victory Hotel at McLaren Vale, and
absolutely.
There's some really interesting, and I think that's what I love doing too, is seeking out those sort of places that are sort of special in their own right about wine.
Because you never know, you might find something really, really interesting, Australian-wise, with a bit of age on it.
Correct.
And they probably wouldn't mark it up like a lot of these really fine dining restaurants would.
Yep, exactly. Or maybe a DRC hiding in the corner.
You never know. So when you went over to Roseworthy, were you studying? Was it winemaking that you were studying?
No, I did wine
marketing.
I did wine marketing, which in those days, he says, has an old hand. It was actually quite wine based. It was based at Roseworthy. It's now not. It's at Waite campus, of course, in Adelaide, but
Urbray.
Yeah, that's right.
I know that because I did it at Urbray.
But we had we had the kindergarten vineyard up there, and people like Peter Dry and Pat Island, and there were some really interesting, legendary people within the industry who taught at the time I was there, and we made our own wine in the kindergarten winery.
Wow, okay.
And so I felt like I actually had got my hands dirty, and we had to do a test of ampelography for 20 different vines, and which was one of the most harrowing experiences, trying to guess what vines were. It's nothing worse when you get to number 8 and you've already nominated 3 of them as Shiraz.
Yeah,
and,
I remember that. I remember that test. That was a pretty hard one.
It's tough.
Looking at a leaf, going,
exactly.
Oh God, how many? Yeah.
And so it was. I feel vindicated that when I did it, it was quite wine based, whereas now I know that it's the wine marketing degree is actually quite statistic and export and whatever, because
absolutely.
It has changed a lot. I mean, obviously the market's changed for us.
But the Australian wine industry, its focus has changed in the last 25 years.
Yes.
In that it became even more export focused, and that's where wine marketing and wine business, as a tertiary course, became much more focused.
Absolutely.
That was my experience. Anyway.
No, that's right. But even people like Dominic Morris at Pondalawi, who, did wine marketing around the same time I did, and, he ended up being a winemaker for Quinta de Crasto, as well as now starting his own winery. And so, I know a number of people who, I think even Neil Pike from memory did wine marketing at Roseworthy, and he's obviously legendary in his own right as a winemaker. And so there's a number of people who, I mean, not that I had delusions of grandeur to be an artist and be a winemaker, and I've helped out on different vintages, but I'm not an artistically bent person. I'm much more a marketer, and that's why I love selling, and I think that's why I chose the retail path.
So was the retail path, was that before or was that because of the wine marketing studies?
No, I was always a great salesperson. I should have been always have the saying that I should have been a car salesman or a stockbroker. I would have made a hell of a lot more money, but then I would have then had to pay the money to drink the wines I drink. So it's an interesting one.
And you would have paid full retail as well.
I would have paid full retail. That's right. And so it's interesting. I love selling, but I'm passionate about selling. So I think also to last in this environment, you have to sell quality. Because obviously, the people you won't get people back if you don't sell them quality and great value, and that's become a big part since the GFC. That price is a big determinant, but it's it is proven that it's not everything.
I kind of think of it as a really interesting challenge is to try and maintain the quality whilst representing value as much as possible. You can't sell anything anymore, so you have to be able to identify when something over delivers at the price point, because people want to spend $20, $25 retail, but if they can give them something that makes them think, oh wow, I didn't expect something that would be this good for that price.
Correct. Yeah.
That's setting them up so that when in the future, when times are better, maybe they do spend $40 on a bottle of wine.
Absolutely, over delivering is everything, and you're right. And I think it is a bit like, for me anyway, it seems to be shooting. I mean, we try 5 to 50 wines every day here at the Cellars, and that comes up with the collection that we have. And therefore, we find wines that are over-delivering because the market is completely overheated. And, I won't say it's shooting fish in a barrel, but it's bloody tough work to come up with the mix. But there are some ripping wines at, I think, all price ranges.
And whilst retail obviously, has there's been a bit of a correction with financial issues and with, the way that retail businesses have changed, and obviously, it's quite dominated by two companies. I think at the same time, as far as winemaking and wine companies, they've had to become a lot more creative and find ways that they can maybe be a bit more cost effective and not just, throw their wine into 100% beautiful new French barriques every year and go, maybe let's do 50% new oak, that kind of thing. So I think, it's been an opportunity for everyone to think a little bit more, think a bit differently and find ways that they can still deliver value whilst, maintaining a price, not seeing inflation kick up prices for wine.
Sure, even people buying $100 bottles need to know that they're getting their money's worth. And so, I often have discussions with high-end clients about how good and whether it's, worthwhile to buy Cullen or Mosswood or, Wild Duck Reserve or whatever it is. And, look, I don't think that everybody likes every wine. I understand that, obviously, but there's no doubt that, I love highlighting the USPs, unique selling points, or the benefits of a winery and the history and tradition. I think there's always great stories to be told about every wine and winery. And that's, again, what, people love, and that's why our events are very popular and do pretty well.
And that really is what independent wine retail can offer, whereas big box retail can't.
They can't.
They're trying to, I think.
Yes.
They're using, I guess, somewhat more media. They're making their beautifully produced videos and stuff like that. But grassroots, people want to talk to a person.
Correct.
And they want to know that the person they're talking to understands what they're looking for and has that depth of knowledge and experience to be able to recommend the best wine for them.
I did my thesis at Roseworthy on the benefits of the internet to the Australian wine industry, which I think would be now 25, 30 years ago.
Yep.
So it was incredibly embryonic, and everyone was chasing me for the results. But the results were pretty minimal because, we didn't really have the internet here at that stage.
No.
With any great, it was a 14.4 bit modem, and you'd press a button and you'd go and make a cup of coffee, and then the page would load. So, I know then it was nothing. The states were starting to get it.
I remember the US was quite strong as far as mail outs and stuff like that. Using database marketing.
Absolutely. So I think Australians more so love the shopping experience and or the personal contact, and I think everyone in general does. There's the challenge moving forward is whether we use social media and or internet regime, especially with the NBN coming in, which will make all the download speeds so much quicker, is that whether someone like myself, whether Phil, the wine merchant, can be in, your place in a virtual tasting type scenario.
Yeah.
And I think that's something we'll look at in the future. But, there's nothing like being there. And again, for me, I'm in a hinterland of Armadale, Toorak, where, God bless the people, have good coin. And, the strategic part was that we know we're in the, a fairly good part, to say the least, of Melbourne, and the local hinterland can afford to buy great wine. So I'm fortunate in that respect because I deal in great wine most days. But, look, I understand that everybody can't afford a $50 or a $30 bottle every night. But, we had to understand and work towards our niche, and that's been interesting. We don't sell casks. I don't know how many wine stores could say that. And and I'm not saying that as a badge of honour or anything. It just, we realised that we weren't selling them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we use them for our palate trainers, but that's about it.
So, post-studies, what was your entree into retail?
Yeah, I was working in the northern suburbs and went from a fairly run-of-the-mill store, was poached by some owners of who were then running Armadale Cellars in the north, which was a pretty high-end...
I grew up in Ivanhoe.
Oh, did you? Oh, wow, what a small world. And God, I didn't realise that. Anyway, so I'd run Armadale Cellars for about 10 years while I managed pubs part-time in my late 20s and was studying and rah-rah.
Wow.
And so Eaglemont gave me a chance. It was a really idiosyncratic store and it was in a cul-de-sac and it was really tough to market it. So after about, a decade there, and I got offered to buy it by the owners, but when looking around for somewhere else, I found Armadale and fell in love with it, and then circumstances became that it, you know, it just obviously looked like a great buy, and it's on a main, you know, arterial that's close to the city. I can see all the benefits in a very wealthy area. Not that Eaglemont isn't, you know, it's a fairly affluent area as well, but it was hard to market that in that cul-de-sac, and so I knew being on a mainstream street, all I had to do was apply the marketing and the tenacity and the sales spiel, so to speak, in what I'm doing. And you know, the underground cellar that we're sitting in now has probably sold me more wine than any of the shelves upstairs.
Absolutely. I know from my experience working in King Godfrey, even though it was only for a year and a half, that beautiful cellar was such a big point of difference.
Yeah.
And people loved coming down, even just to have a look at some of the bottles and be down. And I'm sure it's the same, exactly the same down here. And having the ability to use this space for tastings and dinners and other events, it no doubt is huge.
It is.
Huge benefit for being able to communicate and sell the wine.
And again, you know, you were there when the Tascas ran.
I came in a little bit after.
Okay, yeah, and I went to school with Paul for a useless bit of trivia, and but yeah, so you know, another Ivanhoe boy, pretty simply, you know, I think that's the key, that there is a niche for people who are willing to be very passionate, and it's a tough one because I think we're in a transition period where bricks and mortar are becoming challenging. That's an obvious, and especially since GFC, but I still believe, and I'm again fortunate in where I am, but it's going to get harder and harder with the rents, etc. To keep, you know, whether it's worth having this sort of size building, and I mean, I'm fortunate. There's a few great selling points here that we've got a big car park and, you know, a few rooms and warehouse, etc. on site. I mean, they're huge competitive advantages which you can't replicate in many places now.
Absolutely.
But the harder you work, the luckier you get. And I just saw when I fell across here, which I literally fell across Armadale, and then in the old days it was Duke and Lynch, and they were an import specialist firm, and they'd handed it on to someone who was coming from outside the industry and really struggled, who was a ripping guy, but it is a tough industry, and so he hadn't studied formally in wine and was relying on other people far too much, and he just had to sell. So, you know, that's where I got it from, and I came here and assumed a value against Eaglemont where I was, and this just became an obvious choice, much to the people who were trying to sell me Eaglemont who owned it were a bit shattered, but which is a shame because, you know, I really did love that place and worked very, very hard for them and for that business. But in the end, you sort of have to make a choice, and I chose to go to here to Armadale, to High Street, and 20 years later I sit here fat, unfit and happy.
So what's the history of the building itself? Do you know? I mean, like, so it was solely retail when you bought it?
Yeah, it was been liquor retail for about 40 or 50 years.
Wow, okay.
The cellar we sit in was an old cold store,
Mm-hmm.
and we used to have a little ramp on the side there that we've since cut out and killed, which was where from the street they would load stuff in, a bit like a pub barrel scenario. But this was all redone and dug out by Graham Lynch and Ross Duke, I think, in the old days when they were doing a lot of high-end French and overseas tastings and stuff, and they just wanted an underground cell. That actually was all racked. Actually, they didn't do tastings down here. It was all racked.
Mm-hmm.
So I then took the racks out upstairs and made it so that it was somewhere where people would sit and consume the education and wine, etc. And you know, I think I was one of the first people to ever go for a limited renewable license. So because retail, you know, by rights you can't charge to actually do an event, but I went and got one of the first limited renewable licenses ongoing, which cost me a fortune. Due to the lovely person next door who didn't want me to get it, and but we came to a consensus and it all worked out. And so yeah, no, it's been a big competitive advantage, and we do, you know, we're very proactive with tastings and dinners and events. It's been a big part. We're almost as much in the entertainment industry, I think, than we are in the wine industry. But you know, the wine is obviously the thing that we focus on selling and love it. And yeah, so no, this building is 1882. It's heritage listed, and you know, it's got it's tri-level, which is very unusual, and we probably could use the space logistically a little bit better, but at this stage we use it for offices and
You're 20
storage.
years in, why rush?
Why rush? Still, yeah, I'd like to think there's maybe another 20 to go, and we've got a long lease, so yeah, no, it's there's always challenges. I mean, that's the thing about retail; it's never devoid of challenges, and it is this next phase of the next, let's say, 10 years, I think is going to be interesting in whether traditional bricks and mortars can stay here. I mean, we've moved in the last 3-4 years to we can now nominate up to 12% of our orders are coming from online.
Yeah, okay.
But they still have to come and pick it up, or not. They don't have to, but a number of people choose to pick it up because they love the interaction still.
And that's the future, I think, is finding that balance. And obviously, it's going to be different for every business, but finding that balance between that digital communication and that personal, that face-to-face
Correct.
communication.
I think the obvious thing to say is that wine has to be tried and experienced in your own realm, in the flavours and the characters and the.
Maybe someday there'll be the ability to put your finger on a computer screen and be able to taste a wine, but you can't do that now.
Exactly. No, and I think I'll be long gone before hopefully that comes to pass. But there's no doubt that people want to be present at something, and you've got the interaction, and I think people forget about also the socialisation that wine brings. I mean, really, in the end, if you think about it logically, one of the greatest things that wine gives you is socialisation, and the fact that you can share and talk about the wine and discuss the characters. I mean, what we're like in the industry, we love it. That's what we do. We sit around and drink great bottles.
That's one of the complaints that people have with trade events is that you go along and it's like, no, I want to taste some stuff, but you keep seeing people and have a chat, catching up, because you don't necessarily get to see them that often.
Yeah, well, that's why we get most people to come here now, because you're right. It's just the time period of that where we can't, I can't afford all that socialisation time. I have to get through 5 to 50 wines a day. You've just got to be brutal in almost saying, put down your babies in a glass in the Riedels and leave them there, and we'll try them when we can. And if we love them, we'll tell you.
Yep.
And because that's a hard part, to tell people either their babies are great or ugly. And we don't tell them they're ugly. We just say they're interesting. Yep. That's the code word.
If you can't say something nice,
you can't say something nice. That's right. So, but like children, I can see benefits in every wine. There are, I think, 99% of wines have some benefits. It's just a matter of whether there's any blemishes that override. But most of this is very, very good wine. I mean, we're so spoilt with wine from not only this country but around planet Earth, of course.
We are. The wine quality over the last 25 years, no doubt. Or 20 years, I should say, no doubt has completely changed, and there are countries that back then they might have made some really pretty decent but very cheap wine, and now they're starting to find their own feet as well. I noticed upstairs you had a beautiful Grenache from South Africa, for example.
Exactly, yeah.
And so
many emerging players. And
the access to wine, both as a consumer and as a retailer. That's probably one of the exciting things that's happening now.
Correct.
Back then, when you took the reins of Armadale Cellars, what was the situation as far as wine distribution? Were you buying directly from some producers?
Yeah.
Were there many distributors and importers going around at the time?
It's a really interesting comment. It has changed enormously in the 20 years. It's almost gone full circle, where I was dealing direct with a lot of people, and then a lot of them wanted distributors. And then obviously now what's happening is a more direct model, and I think there's a real head numb for wineries to somehow work out how you can have channels of distribution, be loyal to them, and not be too competitive such that you're treading on each other's toes, but servicing all the markets. Mm-hmm. And that's tough, and that's why a lot of people love coming to us, because we sell a lot of wine to people with good cellars and upmarket boutique collectors, etc., etc. So we're inundated by people wanting us to give us their babies and put them in the right places. But
the tender process for some of the big guys, I'm sure, can be a little bit challenging as far as pulling your pants down, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's some and that's, I mean, now, as I say, it's not shooting fish in a barrel, but there are some incredible deals out there, so to speak. And but then I'm someone who always loves, as you rightly said, to over-deliver. So I've never been one to have ridiculous prices or whatever, and try and take advantage. It's always I want people. The reason why I think 20 years has come about and we're still here at Armadale Cellars under my guise is, we offer great value, and that's why people come back.
Clearly, you teach the customer how to recognise when something is value.
I think education
not to devalue wine.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, the education aspect here is huge, and the introductory wine courses that we do are almost embarrassingly popular. and they're not. We chose not to go down the wet set path. We were offered it, and just distinctively wanted to have our own style and brand. And I'm fortunate I've got a number of wine silly people in my under my employer. And it is a team effort. I mean, you look, Philip just won the other Philip won the Working with Wine Negotiants Award, which is a big thing. Young girl Irish Anya, who's studied wet set, and really I've never seen such a super palate at 30. I'm really blessed, and Pete, used to be a Dan's fine wine guy and just revels in the fact that he's now in small retail. And then we've just had a recent acquisition of a guy out of the golf industry who's now, I can see the wine bug has bit him completely. But he hits off scratch, so nobody wants to play with him, play golf with him. But anyway, no, look, Kingsley's a great asset as well. And I'm really fortunate that along the way I've had a number of who've ended up winemakers and winery owners, that have worked for me. It's
no doubt, like in the same way that you have to work very hard to assess a wine's quality and thinking about how it can over deliver. I'm sure the staff that would have had to come through here, and I'm sure it's somewhere that over the years a lot of people would have wanted to work for the same reason. That there's an opportunity to work with wine education, tasting amazing wines, that kind of thing. So I'm sure again 20 years is a testament to you being able to identify when someone in your staff can contribute and
absolutely
and exceed beyond their capabilities and over deliver in that way.
Yeah, I mean, I've had to learn not to be too dictatorship. Not to have a dictatorship, and make sure it's a everyone has a voice, and it's really lovely to see some of the kids. And even good friend is a nice thing to say for an ex-employee, but Pete Nixon, who now is the chief buyer at Dan's, used to be here at one stage, in the old days, and there's some lovely people who have come through here who have ended up, in fabulous positions in the industry, and even people who have then moved on to other careers, and but have you can still see their passion when they walk in and say, I'm a lawyer, or I'm whatever I am now, a policeman or something, and that's a lovely thing to see that you've sort of touched or been part of why they've become wine silly, and got the wine bug. But the education part is a distinctive. As you said, I think you've got to teach why wine can be so great and all the facets of wine, so that people get an understanding of why it's interesting, and because inevitably most people just drink it and think, it's liquid, but I enjoy it, and then the answer is why.
Mm-hmm. And obviously putting it in context is so important. Having wine dinners. No doubt people can understand, okay, this is why you would pick a different wine to have with this kind of dish.
And as you can tell from my athletically charmed body, wine and food has definitely become a huge part for me. And, I think that's, again, part of the travel and the wine and food experience in places like Alsace or wherever, in Italy is just mind-numbing. And even locally, now there's just so many great bars and... terrific wine and food, Amaru up the road here, Clinton, ex-Fudamond, and just doing, some super stuff. And, that's really exciting.
But in the wine regions as well, like, you go out to the Yarra Valley or the Mornington Peninsula, and there are some really world-class restaurants.
There is absolutely.
And some of the wineries are running world-class restaurants as well.
Correct. And Levantine Hill is a classic example of that with T. Gezard and in the Yarra, and, there's, as you say, many examples. So
10 minutes by tractor down in the Mornington Peninsula.
Is stunning. And I think that's part of what's changed enormously in 20 years. It's, again, I remember, tin sheds being the MO for
literally a cellar door.
Absolutely, yeah. Bill Chambers with his tin shed, and Dave Anderson, same deal, and they were tin sheds, and that's really I look back now and it's you see the money invested at somewhere like Levantine or 10 minutes or
Port Phillip Estate.
Yeah, exactly. It's just you wonder how they never will see return on investment in their lifetime, but they've left a legacy.
But no doubt, like an important part of their success comes from somewhere like here where you are creating wine consumers who want to engage and aren't just looking to go out and see some scenery and drink some wine and then go home feeling happy. They want to have an experience. They want to learn, and they want to enjoy a good meal to really appreciate the quality of these wines, the hard work the winemakers do. When did you start to introduce some of the courses and the events here to sort of see that kind of benefit to the business?
I started at my old place, Eagleman. I introduced courses then, and because I probably didn't have the confidence, to be honest, and the widespread knowledge, I hadn't travelled as well. I engaged a guy, Chris Barnes, lovely fellow, who helped us with our courses, and then basically realised I could see people, were really interested, and then I think about some of the early day scenarios with Crozer, Brian Crozer, who I've now become fairly good mates with, and we even go to the footy together, even for years, and an Adelaide supporter. And
we won't hold it against him.
No, we won't hold it against him. And he's cock a hoop now, of course. But pretty simply, I think Crozer's dissertations and classes that he'd hold were just amazing, and they just thrilled me about what the soils and the extent that Crozer went was incredible, and he knew that that's what would enthuse people, and so I think I got a lot from that. Colin Richardson in the old days, did courses with him at William Angliss, and then also through the trade when he ran Blue Pyrenees, and he was an amazing fellow. Ian Bird at Negotiations, Dave Lemire, who's now a good mate and is an MW. Those sort of people, you could see the education that they were taking on and doing, and also inspiring. So I've got 4 million wine books, so to speak, at home. Most that I've read, and some I've just collected because I'm one of those people who can't go past a bookstore without buying a book. And I just love reading about wine. And there's always the thing about wine is that everyone has an opinion, but and there's no black and whites. It is greyish. There's always a greyishness about wine, and it is interpretive and subjective, and it's an artistic pursuit. So for any human to look at a wine is really their own experience. And then, of course, the problem with experiences are you're limited in your own, how good you are with your own olfactory and what you've experienced in your life and how broad your wine library is. But for me now, I love going out and drinking, really good wines with some of my clients and friends, and, who just love sharing it, because I think that's, again, part of what makes wine special, is that you can share it, discuss it, eat and drink, and see the marriagement happening before you, and that's as good as planet Earth gets in my mind.
But that really shows the relationship that you develop as an independent retailer. You are creating, hopefully, loyalty with the customer, that they are coming back and you're friendly with them, and then it's an opportunity. Well, I'm going to share with you, and you share with me. This is great. You don't, and then you're not thinking of them. It's not a commercial transaction necessarily. You're just sharing experiences.
No. I mean, I've got a lot of friendships over the years of people who are customers and who trust in me, and I'm their wine guy, so to speak. And it's and that's really, I'm humbled by that, and I'm also respectful of that, and it's a real thrill. I mean, to think that people invest in you and then keep coming back is, a great, joy and thrill. And it's something that's, probably kept me going all these years and not wanting to deviate. People say, why don't you open more stores? Why don't you, do this and that? And I think, no, I'm really very happy in my my own little sandpit and enjoying exactly what I do. And I don't want to be, I don't care if I make $1 million. I never will out of wine retailing. It's a true
you
passion.
do in this business.
If you do, it's a very passion-driven
tough.
business. Yeah, no, it's
tough.
extreme. I mean,
$1 million.
You can see where all my profits went into educating myself and enjoying myself. Experience, and I think that's part of it. I've had some of the greatest experiences on planet Earth with people that I help sell wine, whether it's visiting wineries, and I was in Prosecco last year, and it's the first time I'd been there, and the people at Sellerton were there's so much kindness and fantastic friendship, and the sharing of wine and food together, that it's just it's a really pleasurable industry. So like Richard Branson,
Italians do really value
Italians are great,
life.
Oh yeah, they will.
And enjoyment now.
But you see it everywhere too, and I think it's a real brotherhood and sisterhood of of everyone wanting to help each other, I think. But the new paradigms coming through now. How do you sell? How do you have intermediaries? So the whole wholesale, the whole retail part is all changing greatly now, and we're already seeing new models with the chains, selling direct from distribution firms into houses, and it's there's a lot of people starting to forget their channels of distribution. So it's interesting to watch where we look at the market distinctly, because for us there's got to be integrity, and we can't afford to have be undercut stupidly and look. I might be a good bloke, but if I'm going to try and sell a box of wine $60 or $100 dearer, then it'll be Harvey Norman, no interest, and they'll forget me. But at the same time, so I've got to be realistic in the market, and that's why I'm pretty savvy, to say the least, about the market. We spend a lot of time making sure that if we are going to promote something that we believe in, that we can also promote it at a comparable price at the marketplace. And I think that's something that some people aren't willing to do and spend that time, and then they get caught potentially or get disoriented by the market, because it is a very tough market. I mean, it's a tough business, and but when you get it right, and I think there are still lots of opportunities and so many new people and entrants, and got people from Freehand here this week have been going for a few years, but the whole new natural thing, and which for an old dog like me, I still have to sort of think about to some degree, but it's interesting, and so to have them here and show all their natural wines and preservative-free organic is fantastic. And there's so many new things happening, and then sometimes the funny part is you see a fashion that you used to see when you were younger, revisit. Mm-hmm. I'm convinced that Shiraz Cabernet is going to be the next, the claret, so to speak, is going to take everything by storm at some stage. Had this discussion with Crozer and a few other people, and I think that's where Cabernet, which is so out of fashion at the moment. But how do you sell Cabernet? Put it with Shiraz, because everyone loves it. And really, Shiraz Cabernet as a blend is just a really quintessential Australian thing. We just have to come up with a term, or it'll take probably a couple of the big companies. And I know Crozer and a few others are doing Shiraz.
Campbell Mattinson's a big supporter. When he was on the podcast previously, he talked about his love of Cabernet Shiraz Cabernet blends.
Absolutely.
So 20 years. This year, it's a year of celebration.
Yes.
And there are lots of exciting events and tastings that you're running this year. Let me know about some of the people, some of the winemakers that you've got coming in, capping off with that big 20th birthday celebration.
Last week we've had Mike from Ocean 8, Mike Elwood. We've had Nick Glazer here in the cellar last night. We'll have George Mahaley from Paradigm Hill up at Amaroo later this month. The Henschkes will come to town with us in a few months. Wild Duck Creek, Dave Anderson, aka Duck, will be showing his fairly boisterous style of reds and his fantastic personality. And number of Levantine Hill.
Wine and personality matching, not just wine and food matching.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, well, anyone who meets Duck, he's extremely idiosyncratic. He's hilarious. And just new things also, like Levantine Hill thing with Paul Bridgman, who went from Yarra Yering to there and is just doing, in my mind, some of the best things out of the valley. And with the Gerasati family having no fear of supporting him in every realm, it's just an amazing thing to look at. So there's some really amazing brands out there that we're going to be fortunate enough to be able to show and have aligned. Gioconda has always been huge for us. I think is probably, in my mind, the most celebrated, safest brand in the country. That's a big statement, with all due respect. And I think Henschke runs a close second. And I suppose for sheer size, Henschke is probably the one. But those brands to me are very reliable and very good. And so we'll do a Cullen event. I know Keith and Claire Mosswood will do something with them in the near future. And then, we'll have some overseas contingents come in. We've done a Bouchard and Faverley already this year, which is lovely, and there'll be other Burgundian producers. Champagne's always a big thing come September. So we're pretty hopeful that we'll have a number of really high-end champagne houses. Look, it'll never end. It's an ongoing party. I mean, this year just gave us this excuse to, put on the 20-year tag. I got convinced by a couple of staff and a marketer that said, "No, you got to do something. You can't just forget this. This is special." But we'll probably do the same thing next year and call it our 21st birthday, in the joys of being a great salesman. But no, it has sort of maybe it's crystallised the fact that it is pretty special to be able to.
It's a milestone. Absolutely.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I mean, 20 years is nothing to be sneezed at, and it's a big part of my life, obviously. But to be able to do what you do for a living and really enjoy it is a special thing. I'm sure there's been costs along the way in varying realms, but as they say, no regrets. And again, I've been really fortunate to have enjoyed some of the greatest wines with some absolutely beautiful people who created them, and others who just love drinking them and want to have part of it. And to be able to share that is very, very special. And almost going back to my Christian brother days, it sounded almost religious, didn't it?
Well, yeah, we all do bow down to the Church of the Vinous Nature.
Correct.
But obviously, there's lots of information about all those events on the Armadale Cellars website, so people should book some spots. Because I believe there is an opportunity to win a golden ticket.
We're doing golden tickets. Yeah, there's 20 events, and they're listed on the I think on the website and or social media. And the 20 different wineries that we've nominated, and there's many, Toll Puddle and Wild Duck, and a number of ones I've mentioned already. We're giving away, and we did last night at Nick Glatz's shindig, a golden ticket, which will be in September. There'll be a special dinner in the cellar here for 20 odd disciples, and that'll be religious. We'll pull some serious wines out. I don't want to go in too much, so I don't give too much away. But there'll be no doubt some birth year bottles. I was a 64 baby, and
do you know what birth year I am? 82.
82, another great year, awesome year. I got children, one at 96 and 202, so they're good Australian
Pretty
years.
good, yeah.
And it's 82 is a ripper.
Yeah.
And
I turned 35 in about a month, and I've got an 82 to open.
Nice. Yeah, well, I mean, and again, for me, something I've come to really enjoy as time's gone on is the joy of understanding matured wine, which is an expensive hobby. And a long-term hobby, but
time and money.
Correct. And again, I've been lucky that a number of customers and friends have really been lovely in sharing fabulous bottles. Had a 39 Loire Echezot for lunch last Friday. Sorry.
Oh goodness.
Which was pretty special, and those are the sort of bottles that you think about. I mean, they're the things that to me make me go silly. And but even just a simple drink can also be very pleasurable. And had a bottle of Pigier Brunier last night. Great Grenache from the Rhone, and I don't think wine doesn't need to be necessarily mind-numbing and too.
You can find pleasure in all price points, I think.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, no, and I think that's again something that's probably stood me in good stead for 20 years. Is that realising that it's not all about $100 bottles or $200 bottles or whatever, but again, there's a lot of pleasure at all price points, as you rightly say. And I think that's the skill that myself and the team want to put forward, and why we only, stock, X, Y, and Z rather than everything. Mm-hmm. And it's a very selected group of wines and wineries that we have. And but obviously, we've just started doing a lot of Hentley Farm gear. That's there's always something new or a brand that just needs to extend a little bit more. And so, we've been really fortunate to take on Hentley Farm lately and add that to the great realm of Barosses that exist. But look, we could go on and on all day about all the different wineries. There's so many good ones. And
what I would recommend is that people, first head to the website, follow Armadale Cellars on social media, and then come into the shop, introduce yourself to Phil and some of the staff, let them know that you heard about Armadale Cellars on the podcast, and have a look at the amazing range of wines that they do have here. But Phil, it has been fascinating and fantastic to sit down with you and hear about your background and all the exciting things that are happening with Armadale Cellars this year. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, James. And I must admit, I've been inspired too, because I'm not being an old dog. I don't, not on to everything that's to do with technology, but I must admit the podcast thing, you've opened my eyes, and I've started looking at podcasts in other realms. I was listening to a podcast about champagne this morning, so I thank you for that, because you've actually
pleasure.
opened my eyes. And listened to young Ned Goodwin talk on your podcast, who was, I love Ned and he's fabulous. There's some really special people in wine, and so I'm going to make sure that my clients and different friends hear about you. And
Fantastic!
there are, those podcasts.
But you mentioned it before about telling a story.
Yes, exactly.
That's the best thing, I think. Apart from obviously drinking and enjoying it, sharing experience, it's about the storytelling, and everyone has their unique story to tell. And then from as far as the making of it, the selling of it, and then the enjoying of it, it's always a story. It's always and as you mentioned, it's about perspective. Everyone's experience is different.
But thank you, and thank you for making this part of your podcast.
My pleasure.
Cheers.
And thank you guys for listening to another episode of the Vincast. I have been James Scaresbrook, otherwise known as the Intrepid Wino, and I would love for you to follow me on social media, on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. I'm at Intrepid Wino. You can also subscribe to the Intrepid Wino YouTube channel, where you can see lots of different videos, including my series called Let's Taste, where I open up Australian wines and share my impressions of them. I'd love for you to subscribe to the Vincast on iTunes, Stitcher, Player FM, any number of different podcast hosting or sharing apps. Subscribing means you get the newest episode as soon as it becomes available, and it's a great way to provide feedback to both myself and to potential guests and listeners by leaving a rating and a review. I always love hearing from the listeners. If you head to intrepidwino.com, there's lots of other content there, writings and videos and lots of other stuff. It's also a great way to find out how to get in contact with me. I'd love to hear from you, so please do. And if you'd like to suggest a guest for the show, please get in contact with me. Guys, until next time, bye.